Hi, everybody. This is Martha Creek, marthacreek.com to contact me. There's also plethora of free videos, resources, podcasts, all of that right there on the website, including my emails and my phone numbers. And I'm delighted to be with you today. These are mentoring moments with Martha. And I have a dear, dear colleague, friend, and sister soul here, Reverend DeeAnn Morency, DeeAnn Weir Morency. And she correct me on the correct pronunciation of her name and use some French. So take it away.
Well, my wife is French. And so Weir was my maiden name. And when my wife and I got married, I added her name to my name. And the French pronunciation, which I do very badly, would be Morency. So the Americanized version of that is Morency.
There you have it. So Reverend DeeAnn Weir Morency spoke in Southern slang. And then French that would maybe make the French roll over as well.
My wife just poked her head in and shot me this like, what are you doing? Look.
So save your critical comments, please, and uplifting, supportive comments if you're listening to this podcast or this interview. So the purpose of this is to get empowered teachings to the whole of the planet. To bring forth things that matter to us, to bring forth ways that we practice to grow ourselves up spiritually and emotionally, and to then shed light on where potential is, infinite potential is, frankly, for the whole of the human experience, for the whole of the human species. So this is offered with that devotion from both of our hearts. So then whatever becomes of it belongs to the universe to do that. So I know from talking with you earlier that you spoke about your devotion, Reverend DeeAnn, around affirmative prayer, how important that had been to you. And you described it in your conversation with me as it saved your life. Mm-hmm. So speak about that here for people that are curious about prayer. Prayer is a spiritual practice, affirmative prayer, what you mean by that, and hopefully to inspire others to at least give it a fair test to see what could it mean in their own lives.
Yeah, I mean, and it really is true. I really can say that with the deepest sense of integrity that affirmative prayer saved my life. I was raised Jewish, conservative, Orthodox. And actually heard the call to ministry very early on in my life and went and said at 11 that I wanted to be a rabbi and was immediately told that that was impossible because I was a female. And so began my life's journey of finding a spiritual teaching in a place, in a space that actually felt authentic and whole for me. And so my prayer life had been very grounded in prayers that were beautiful. The Hebrew prayers are just beautiful. There's something about the language that has been spoken for thousands of years, the sharing of those sounds as you make them. But the prayers are by rote, like you are reading set prayers that are in the Siddur, that are, that have been handed down from generation to generation, which is beautiful and incredibly powerful and moving. And so I had no experience with extemporaneous prayer. I had no frame of reference for prayer that you actually just spoke, except my experiences with some proselytizing Christians who I once had them lay hands on me to heal me. I had some roommates who were very, very devout, and I was sick, and they said, "Can we pray for you?" And I was like, "Anything, please." I feel so awful. And they did this whole laying on of hands thing. And I remember it making me very uncomfortable because there was something raw about it. There was something very present moment about it. It wasn't planned. It was completely spontaneous. It was something that was arising out of their personal understanding of something. And that moment has always sort of stayed with me. And I've practiced, I'm also an interfaith minister as well as a unity minister. So I have studied and lived into so many different teachings. And most of those teachings have forms of rote prayer, where you learn the prayers, and you don't, especially when they're in foreign languages, during my yogic training, during, you don't even necessarily know what you're saying, really. You have the general idea of what you're saying, but you don't really know what you're saying. And again, the beauty of those sounds can actually transport you somewhere. When I first found New Thought teaching, and I started off at Agape with Michael Bernard Beckwith, is where I was an Agape practitioner, and that's where I first really discovered New Thought teachings. I remember taking my first class, and we were, the first day of the first class, we were paired up with prayer partners and we were told that we were going to start praying. And I freaked out. I was losing it. I was so, Martha, it's hilarious when I look back on it, and it's not, because I know so many people who I teach prayer to have had that exact same experience of almost a terror at being made vulnerable in some way that speaking extemporaneously in that way does, let alone like trying to understand what exactly are we doing with affirmative prayer. There's these steps, and what I have to claim? Like, what am I? So there's this mental piece that sort of doesn't know how to do it. But then for me, it was really about this like heart space of what would it mean for me to actually speak from my heart, and activate from my heart. And I had a lot of unworthiness. I had a lot of healing that I was so interested in stepping into. And so I sat there on the precipice with that affirmative prayer. And we did an exercise where you just had to, as a group, everybody was doing it, and I was like one of the last people to go. Which, me, that's so unusual. I'm usually like first one up, first one in. And I did it. And I was like in shock. Number one, at how much more simple it was than I had thought it was, right? I had built all this up in my head. And number two, how like soothing it was. Like how calming it was, how centering it was. And something unlocked for me, a door sort of unlocked for me around what it meant to speak my truth. And I think that's the space where affirmative prayer is so powerful, and why it can be a little intimidating, is because you're not speaking somebody else's truth. You're not speaking the truth that someone else has spoken for how many years, or some prophet in their enlightened state, had this epiphany moment and shared it. You're just standing in your own self, your own, and ultimately the goal of affirmative prayer is for you to stand in your own divinity, for you to recognize your own divinity, for you to speak from that divinity. And it began one of the most powerfully healing processes that I have ever engaged with, that I still engage with. I mean, affirmative prayer is like my life. In religious science, or Centers for Spiritual Living, which they're now called, there's a specific type of affirmative prayer that for me was so helpful, and it's called, you'll love this, argumentative prayer. And it's where you actually allow yourself to argue with yourself. So you're sitting there doing your prayer and you're like, I am whole. You're affirming, I am whole. And you hear this little voice inside of you go, really? Really? Are you really whole? I don't think you're really whole. Right? I can give you a laundry list of reasons why you're not really whole. And argumentative prayer is where you don't ignore that little voice. You don't pretend that you're not hearing that little voice. You don't pretend that that's not somehow built into your bones about what you actually believe is true about yourself. In fact, argumentative prayer says, listen to that little voice that says, really, I don't think I'm really whole because, I did this in my past. So how could I be whole if that's part of who I am? And then what you do in an argumentative affirmative prayer is then you meet that argument with more truth. but compassion and forgiveness, we're growing, we are always expanding, we're always a larger container of the divinity that we are, and we are revealing that in time and space. So that moment for you was a moment of revelation of the fact that there's more of your true nature seeking to reveal itself. And then you listen. What part of you wants to argue with that? What part of you doesn't want to admit that that could possibly be true? And it's basically a dialogue with your small understanding of yourself and your divine understanding of yourself. And for me, entering into that because what I loved about it was it didn't ask me to pretend something. That's the thing I love about this teaching, is it's not about pretending. It's not about just like sort of slapping a pretty bow on top of a whole pile of muck, right? And saying, oh, look, it's all good. There are ways to engage with these practices so that you're actually in healing. You're actually engaging on a deep level of healing.
Yeah. Well, you spoke about also in our preliminary conversation about embodiment, and that's what I believe it is. So I have not heard this, and I started in religious science myself 25 years ago and practiced every prayer that was ever offered and the techniques and approaches to prayer, and I've not heard it.
Oh, about argumentative prayer? Yeah.
And as you describe it, I'm not saying it wasn't called that it wasn't that way, but I didn't have a framework for that. And how I have prayed that way, so I've had direct experience of it, and it's integrative prayer for me, which is integrating all of those parts that were disowned, denied, made less than, shamed about, guilted about, blamed for, that all of those parts are welcome back in. And that prayer opens a field for all of those disowned, disintegrated aspects of ourselves to be brought back in. And that it can have its way. It can say no, but yeah, and that's the resistance of the mind to say yes and. So yes, I did that, and believing what I believed at the time, it makes perfect sense why I responded that way. And believing what I did at the time, it made perfect sense that I didn't do more, or that I did less, or whatever. So it's powerful to hear. So I'd love, though, to give a summary here for those that are new to this, that you can look up. That's what DeeAnn is talking about on the websites, and to lay out, if you will, today here what the general steps that define what affirmative prayer are.
So I'm actually in the process. I've been recreating Unity's affirmative prayer process. I call it affirmative prayer for the 21st century, because I feel as if there is a barrier. I honestly believe that affirmative prayer is New Thought's greatest gift to the world. I really absolutely believe that. There is, and it's something that makes us unique. It's not something that every other tradition has. And I watch our own communities struggle with what affirmative prayer is, because there's something about it that is, because it is embodied ultimately, because it is this feeling tone space that you are activating, it can sometimes get a little wishy-washy. So the 5 steps as I teach them at Unity San Francisco, and have had tremendous success in accessibility to the process with these 5 steps, is that the first step is to be open. Just to be open to a new understanding, open to a possibility. Because when we step into prayer, usually it's, we can do affirmative prayer for everything from our blessings on to our challenges, but most often people come to us for affirmative prayer with their challenges. So the first step in that is to just be open that whatever challenge we're experiencing, that there is something more that's possible. Like just being open to possibility, that you may not have it at the moment, you may not sense it right now, you may not quote unquote know what it is, but that you are willing to open yourself up to something new making itself known to you. So that's just the first step, is to just open. And that can be as simple as laying your hand on your heart and just softening the heart space. It can be taking a couple of breaths, right? And letting the mind quiet down. The mind thinks it has all the answers, right? And it really doesn't, but it likes to think it has all the answers. So the activity of opening can be just a calming breath or two, hand on the heart. Sometimes I'll literally just say to myself, I'm open to a new understanding, right?
Well, I think it's powerful, honey, and I want to go with these slow because I think it's such a powerful message. And you're right about that. It's a spiritual practice that is only going to be effective to the degree that it's practiced and embodied. And it speaks though also to saying, oh, step one is open, like, oh, check. And it's like, no, it's a one thing entirely to say I'm open conceptually or theoretically without actually opening. And we're wired, and it's proven psychologically that we're wired, some of us, with what the psychologist calls a closed mindset, a fixed mindset. So to open when it's like it's hopeless, it's hopeless, it's hopeless, it's hopeless, it's hopeless, it's hopeless. If that's a closed, fixed mindset, it's no little thing to put a crowbar in there and crack that open enough to say, maybe, just maybe, it's not hopeless. So I'm going to stay open to a broader possibility, a new possibility. So these steps are not little checkbox exercises. I mean,
and what's beautiful about what you're saying, Martha, is that the practice of affirmative prayer practices you.
Yeah.
So the more you do this, the more you enter into these steps to the best of your ability, wherever you are in the process, there's a feedback loop that begins to get activated. So the more we can trust that when we pray, new possibilities do arise, the easier it is for us to then step into, I am open to a new possibility. So there's a way that the process itself is going to help us to grow and to expand. But those first steps where we don't quite know this yet can be incredibly challenging. And I had a teacher when I was at Agape who told us literally that as you are moving through affirmative prayer, if you don't actually really feel as if you have embodied whatever place in the process you're in of this movement, I call them the 5 movements, right? That if you're not able to actually really be there, then just stop. Because there's not really a whole lot of point of continuing on to the next space. Just make that your prayer. My prayer is that I can just be open. That's enough. Like I'm just going to be, and just sit with that piece of it. So we can start with baby steps. We don't have to dive into this whole thing right away. We can sort of grow our capacity to be in this process.
Yeah. So keep moving then, honey, to step 2.
Okay, so step 2. So we're open now to a new possibility. And so step 2 would be to place our attention outside of ourself and our problem, right? To sort of lift ourselves out of the day-to-day. And for that, what we do is we want to recognize God is. Now, God is a catch-all term, and it can be really triggering for a lot of people. So I want to just say that whatever that means to you, whatever that, there are so many names for it: universal mind, infinite allness, the isness, there is no divine order, right? There's so many different names for it. Whatever works for you, but being able to recognize it in some way. So when I teach this, I often use beautiful images from nature, right? I use these gorgeous pictures of like what is here in that we can recognize that there's something larger than us that is right now available and accessible to us. So whether it's looking up at the stars and getting a sense of the expansiveness of the galaxies, or looking at a beautiful river winding its way through this serene and calm and beautiful valley, or right, or the lushness of a field that's overflowing with flowers and we can see renewal and all of those things. So in some way we want to recognize that God is. And however that works for you, for some people, it's their relationships that help them recognize God is, that helps them to touch that space where there is that organizing principle of good, however that looks to you, right? So we recognize that. And that can also be a challenge, as you were saying, right? To be able to see it, right?
We get triggered and then don't go beyond that says, oh, she just said God, it's not my God. It's like then call it what you will. So the offering here is to find something that works for you. It's not to try to do it DeeAnn's way or Martha's way, but to find something that from your openness that you can then call it whatever you want to call it. So name it what you name it, and to keep the mind and heart open enough to say, I'm only looking for what is bigger than me, what is creation itself, what is creator itself. So it's then an acknowledgement there is something bigger than me by whatever name you call it. Step 2.
Yes. And then there comes the part that is uniquely new thought, which is step 3, where so we've recognized something out there as being God is, and now we get to a place of integration, where we actually sort of acknowledge that what is out there is actually right here. So we integrate, so we go from the God is to the I am, to the integrated understanding that I am everything that I see out there, whatever you see out there, the beauty, the harmony, the grace, the order, the power, the strength, the fluidity, the flow, the abundance, whatever that is, it's actually also you. It's available as you. And this is another place where it's practice, right? How do we go from the infinite allness and then hone that in and be like, that's mine?
Yeah. So, and I want to get a little more concrete about this if you're willing to, because this is where, depending on your beliefs and your belief systems, that it's in some way diminishing God, that God is beyond us, that God is not of the flesh, that God is not of man, of woman, whatever. So for me, I simply go with something is breathing me. Mm-hmm. So whatever it is breathing me. So I'm not the source of my own breath. So I can try to hold my breath, cut off from my breath, and I can't do it for long. So something is breathing me. So this could be something very simple. So this God is, I am, something is expressing me. Something is living me, thinking me, moving me, expressing as me. So to keep it, my encouragement is to keep it as simple as you can, and to avoid any kind of old paradigms or worldviews or belief systems that would cause you to reject something like this without some application, without some practice of it. Just give it a fair test.
So in that can help, and when you're sort of sitting with the like, really, I'm divine, really? I don't know if I totally can believe that. Is to say it's available and accessible as me. So if what you're seeing in the awe and the wonder is abundance, right? That there's a bazillion grains of sand on that beach, that's abundance, right? That you can also say what's available there is available to me. It's available right here. So even if you can't quite make the leap to owning your divinity, a way in can just be that even if you don't necessarily know that you can own it, that it's available to you, that you can access it if you choose. So I use that a lot in my prayers, right? That
Thank you, honey. So it's like then start where you are,
Mhm.
start from where you are, and ease into it, baby steps, as DeeAnn said, and give it a go to see if even if I can't claim I am divine, then I am being breathed. I am made from something bigger than me. I am aware of creation like grains of the sand, that I'm one of creation. I'm one with creation.
Yeah, and the foundational principle that underlies all of Unity's teaching, and particularly affirmative prayer, is this idea that there's only one power and one presence expressing through and as everything, right? Like that's I call it the prime principle. And from that principle, everything else sort of arises, what we believe. So keep coming back to, well, if there's only one power and one presence, if there is only one power and one presence, then somehow it's me. Somehow, I don't have to know how. I don't have to quite understand it. I don't have to mentally get it really. Just the idea that if there is one power and one organizing principle, then somehow I'm a part of that oneness, right? I wouldn't be outside of it, because then there isn't one, there's two, right? That dualism dynamic. So we move to that sense of integration. And this would be the place where we would say there is no separation. That literally can be the language you use in this place. So there's no separation. There's only one activity happening. So it is my life. That abundance is available as my life. That beauty is available as my life. That wholeness, that light, that love is available as my life. And when I'm in particularly challenging straits, sometimes what I'll even say is, it's available to me even though it doesn't feel like it right now. I'll actually say that in my prayer. Like, it's available to me even if it doesn't feel like it. It is available to me. And again, it's like that first step. It's just being willing that if I don't actually feel it, that I'm willing to create a space for something new to arise within me.
And to awaken to what that is. And I think it's important here to define the it here, that beauty is it, as beauty is available to me. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be that beauty that I see. You may say, I've never been on a beach. I'll never be on a beach. There's no way, no how. I can't see how I'd ever be on a beach. It's like, okay, then set that aside. What is available to me that I could relate to?
Exactly. Because the
world.
Power of affirmative prayer is that it's personal. Like, that is the whole point of affirmative prayer, is that it is completely, powerfully, and sometimes terrifyingly personal. It's what speaks to your heart. It's what speaks to your understanding of truth.
Yeah. So, okay, carry on.
Okay, so by now, you can kind of feel there's a movement here, right? We're moving towards something. We started with, okay, I'm just going to open myself up, and we got as large as we possibly could with the recognizing God is. We got as big as we could possibly get, and then we got as intimate as we possibly could get, right? And in that movement, there is potential, there is possibility. And so that's where we open into, well, if all of this is actually true, okay, I've just walked through these steps. And if I'm open, and if God is, let's say, love, right? If I'm struggling in a relationship, and I can recognize God as love, and I can recognize that love is available to me right now, then the next step is to realize how it's going to show up as me. So I realize that if love is available to me right now, I can be more loving in how I show up with my sister. If love is available to me right now, I can trust that love is available even when it doesn't feel like it. If love is available to me right now, I can choose love in every moment, I can actually choose it if it's available to me. And I mean, even as I'm doing this, like, you know, sort of like nebulous, like we're making this up kind of thing, like I'm getting God bumps here, right? Because as we stand in the I can, that's what the realization is, right? So the whole point of affirmative prayer is to activate the divinity that is yours in time and in space. Like that's the point of it. It's not just to be like, and I've done these prayers too. So, you know, where it's just like, love is, I'm love, and all is good. How have I activated that in my life concretely, like really, so that it can manifest in some way, so that I can demonstrate a new understanding? And it's in that realization stage where you set what it is that you can do, what you can be, what you can, right, actually live into.
Well,
And it all kind of flows. If you get the flow, you get to the I can, and you sort of like, oh, I can be amazing. I can be a completely different person in this relationship.
absolutely. And I have some power to respond to this differently. And instead of the mind focusing on what I've lost, what I didn't have, what I don't get, and it's like, wait a minute. I can be and express love. I can seek and find where love is present in relationship, maybe even in this one where my mind was blocked and closed before. And if I can't find it here, then where can I find it? Where can I say, that's my definition of love? It could be with my granddaddy at 3 years old. It could be here. But this realization phase is where what I call it, honey, is we return to reality.
Yeah.
A return to reality, the reality that love is not obscure. It's not missing. It's my lack of awareness of it. So I'm back to the reality that what I am, in this case, we've used the word love, which is funny that you used it because I won't even speak it. I don't even use the word hardly, or the term love.
Oh, that's funny. Well,
Understood it is, honey.
so the empowerment piece that you touched on is really what affirmative prayer is all about. So if you followed me in this, you know, as we move through these movements of consciousness, they're really states of consciousness that we're moving through, right? That we're welcoming. As we move into these different states of consciousness, we are letting go of the idea that we don't have agency, number one, and we're letting go of the idea that somehow out there there's some benevolent or not so benevolent something that is going to decide for us whether or not this relationship happens. I don't know. Like, if it's meant to be, I hear this a lot. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. It's like, well, I actually personally believe that we have agency, and that we can decide that we don't want this to be, and that we can decide that we would like it to be, but it may not be. It's not that we get everything that we want. It's that we are owning our empowerment to decide.
Say the part about we don't get what we want all the time.
We don't get what we want all the time. Prayer is not, you know, affirmative prayer is not a vending machine, right? It's not like I put my prayer in and I pull the lever and then out comes the thing I want.
Exactly as I ordered. Yeah. Imagine. Now, Sarah, carry on, honey, because part of our misunderstanding about this that would cause to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. Like I prayed for something and didn't get it. And
so
it's like
the idea of affirmative prayer is to change yourself. So if you remember, when you started the affirmative prayer, there was whatever challenge was so big and so looming that you couldn't see other options, other possibilities, except for perhaps pain and suffering and unhappiness. And what is being invited to change in affirmative prayer is how you hold all of it. That's what's being invited to change. And that's the empowering piece of it. That's what makes affirmative prayer so powerful. So let's go back to the relationship example. If the relationship is painful, right? And you're recognizing love is, and you're saying, I can see love in this relationship, right? Even if it doesn't look like it, because I know there's something else here. Oh, well, maybe that will help you to be able to let go of the need to have this relationship look a certain way, because you recognize and realize that even if it doesn't look the way you want, love is still present. You could never speak to that person again, and love is still present. You could never have anything to do with them again. And that doesn't mean that the relationship still isn't grounded in love. And so it's a way for us to move past conditions, things having to look a certain way, and anchor ourselves in these, I call them divine qualities. So when we get to that God is, and it's so big, right? It's like God is, wow. How do we even begin to define and describe and talk about something that is the infinite allness, that is absolute isness? So we pick a word, a phrase, and I call them facets of the divine. And all of them are doorways that take us to the same place. So these are the absolutes, the things that are unchangeable, immutable: love, grace, beauty, harmony, right? They are strength, power. They're there. They're there. They're always there. And the affirmative prayer is the process that we get to see it and allow it to shift our behavior. Our behavior, I want to be really clear, our behavior is what is shifted. Our container for ourselves and the world gets shifted. And as that happens, because there is only one thing happening, our entire experience of the world shifts. So it feels as if the world has shifted, but it's really that we are the ones that shifted in this.
Which holds real power.
Yeah.
So when we're less into suffering, then there is a way out. and
I think that's why it terrified, honestly, I think that's why it terrified me so much, because I think on some level I felt the power that was there. And then all of a sudden there's really no excuses. It's harder once you really start to get this. It's really hard to sort of push responsibility out on other people for your own unhappiness.
Yeah, so hear this well, then nobody can be the matter with you.
Yeah.
When you're practicing this.
Yeah.
Okay, so move to our final piece.
So our final piece is gratitude and appreciation. Gratitude and appreciation, not because our problem is now solved, right? But it's gratitude and appreciation for the change that we have experienced because we stepped into the affirmative prayer field. It's gratitude and appreciation for our new understanding, gratitude and appreciation for how we can now move in the world in a different way.
Yeah. And I did a gratitude class just before getting on the interview, and it was considered by this psychologist and even from a book that I found a quote from Deepak Chopra, that it's the greatest of the spiritual practices, gratitude, as far as empowerment. So to summarize then,
so I open. So and visually, the image that I use when I teach this is a spiral. Okay, so we start in the center. We're sort of closed at the center of the spiral in our suffering or in whatever it is that we want to experience a shift around. So we're going to open, which opens us into the spiral. And as we open, we're willing to recognize God is in some way that feels authentic. That's the whole point of this. It's got to be real for you, right? God is. And then from that largeness of God is, right? So we're going from a transcendent God to an immanent God. They're both God or whatever word you use. So it's not one over the other. One's not better than the other. It's just we're practicing being able to contain all of the faces of the divine. So we go from the God is, and we say, and it's me, it's available to me, it's accessible to me. Therefore, literally that word, therefore, I can, and we move into realization. I can be a loving partner. I can be more patient and more compassionate when my sister drives me nuts, right? Whatever it is, but I can't, how are you going to show up in it? And then gratitude for the opportunity to know the truth of who you are, to know the truth that is available to you, and that you get to stand in that in a new way. And that will shift the relationship. Yes. Not because the other person is changing, but because you are, because you're willing to change.
Yeah, which holds all the power of the universe.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you for this, honey, and for your passion for this, your empowerment of this, and your embodied practice of this, DeeAnn, and for any of you listening. And I was thinking about this, like one of the things around affirmative prayer coming into this without even knowing that was going to be the topic that I would want to debunk. So see if there's anything about affirmative prayer you want to debunk, honey, as I respond. And that is the notion that you have to use certain words, or you got to use somebody else's words, or you got to use a formula out of a book. So what's been offered here today is a general outline, a general guideline. And this notion, so many people I've witnessed directly are afraid to pray now. They won't pray out loud because they may not say it right. They may not do it right. And I say, pooey, pooey. So start somewhere, use this as a general outline, give it a fair test, see how it aligns with your mental aspects, your physical and emotional, spiritual aspects of yourself. Give it a go. It costs nothing. There's no reason not to give it a try, and not to worry about doing it wrong. Just practice and give it a go.
So there really is no wrong way to pray, and there are no prayer police, right? No prayer police. There is nobody, certainly not me, going to sit there and tell you that the way you pray is wrong, right? So the goal of having a process is that this process has supported people. Ultimately, the point is to get to the realization stage. That's the whole point. All the rest of it is preamble to get you to the place where you realize what you are capable of, what you can activate, what you can live into. That's the whole meat. That's the meat and potatoes of the whole process. So everything else is just designed to kind of lead you into that space of what you can actually activate for yourself. So if you hold that as that's the point of the framework. So there's a really funny story. Reverend Michael Beckwith used to share this story once, that there was this practitioner down in Louisiana. She lived on a boat out in the middle of the swamp, one of those houseboats in the middle of the swamp. And she was known for her healing. And people would come from far and wide and travel through the swamp and tell her all the stuff that was wrong with them. And she would look at them and she would go, "Tain't so." And that was it. That was her prayer. And people would walk away healed. And I say that because she had embodied and incorporated whatever process she had to get to the realization stage where she just knew the truth, that this is what I know you're capable of healing. So all that stuff you're telling me, it's just not real. And she would know it so powerfully that the person that she was with would have an actual embodied experience of that truth for themselves. So the steps are there, the movements are there, they're there to support you so that you understand something more about what is possible. That's it. They're not there to restrict you. I often talk too about the art and craft of affirmative prayer. So when we're talking like this, we're looking at the craft. We're sort of breaking it down and we're looking at the craft that goes into it. And there's a time and a place to look at the craft. And then there's just when we pray. And that's just the art of it. That's just where you just follow and you listen and you allow. And so somewhere between those two, there's the balance of going back to the craft and looking at that. And then you just keep applying it. But the whole point is the art. The whole point is the embodied experience of it.
Yeah. And to move it beyond a concept and beyond a theory to something that is true for you.
Exactly. Out of the head, right into the heart space.
Every one of you listening, I delight at the fact that you'll give this a go, that you'll give it your own approach, you'll give it your own practice, and that you'll get to realize for yourself what the potential of this is, and whether you carry on with it or not, but to give it a fair go, to give it a fair test. And I thank you, Reverend DeeAnn, for your time here today, your care, your ministry, your call to ministry, your leadership, your practice, your application, decades of this. You've been at this.
I have been. It's a long time.
And I stand with you in that. So let people know how to contact you if you want to put that out here, how they can contact you if they want to.
Absolutely. So I have a private practice. So I'm the associate minister at Unity San Francisco, and people can always reach me through Unity San Francisco. But I also have a private practice called A Radiant Joy, and it's at radiantjoy.com. So you can actually reach out to me that way or through Unity San Francisco. I often teach prayer classes. I'm actually going to be doing a virtual retreat at the Village in March with Linda Martella-Whitsitt on affirmative prayer. So there's lots of opportunities. If you want to know more about this, it's something I have a great passion for. So I'd be thrilled to support you if you want to dive into it in any way.
I hope you will too, and invite others. And she's talking about Unity Village in the middle of out in Missouri, near Kansas City, Missouri. So it's a great place to visit. And we're going to believe that we'll be open and
it's going to be virtual. It'll be virtual. So people can drop in from anywhere where they are. Yep.
Your friends, bring your prayer groups and prayer partners and all of that, and join up with that. And marthacreek.com to contact me any way I can serve you. I'm mission to serve those who serve, and do whatever you can to get these inspired teachings out to the whole of the planet. So then co-inspire with Reverend DeeAnn and me to reach broader and broader markets, so that eventually all of humanity has the support and the access to a practice that could literally, as Reverend DeeAnn said, save their life, change their life. And we offer this from that place of our own devotional heart, that it's offered for that. So co-inspire with us to expand. Yes. We meet again.
All right. I love you, Martha. Thank you all. Thank you so much for this. It was so much fun.
Love you too, honey. Till we meet. marthacreek.com if I can support you. Blessings.